I want to first talk about the national debt and the taxpayers' exposure regarding the KBRA. And don't the taxpayers deserve some protection here? In other words, shouldn't those receiving the KBRA benefits be required to pay to finance the KBRA program? And if the costs of the program are too high, as you know, national debt's over $13 trillion. If the costs of the programs are too high for Congress to consider, could the cost and programs be spread out over time and phased in slowly? If the answer to that is yes, how so? And then I've got some other economic questions. How much money will implementation of the agreements bring to the local economy? And how many jobs will be created? And anybody can take those questions. And then finally, I want you guys to address the expansion, as has been described in the press, the expansion of federal control over our local community, should this pass. So if you guys need clarification, I'll be happy to.
Yeah. I'll start by saying we have spent millions and millions and millions of dollars treating symptoms, and we haven't spent enough investing in the cure.
Who's the we?
We, the public. We, the taxpayer.
Do you have a dollar amount, Steve? I mean, I remember I had a dollar amount in my mind a couple years ago when there was a hearing on this topic, and like from 2001 to 2007, I believe,
call the cure. You brought out a point. We're already spending programmatically tens of millions of dollars in the Klamath Basin every year tinkering with things. Now, we're looking at a budgetary in the KBRA of about $1 billion over a period of 10 to 12 years. And some of those monies basically are just what I call program monies. In other words, they would be spent in the Klamath Basin anyway. And so we're looking at additional funds. And it depends on when you look at the budgetary. When we first started developing budgets 3 years ago, we were looking at maybe $400 million of those particular funds, and I'm not sure what the dollar, it would be what I would call new money. I, for one, am a taxpayer, and I'm concerned about where my tax dollars go. I would like to have my tax dollars stop treating symptoms and start solving problems. Then they would truly, what I would call, be an investment. Now, we can talk about the investment dollars. In Klamath County alone, if we implement the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement, we would be looking at business revenues, annual impacts of about $40 million. And then we'd be looking at, those would be during the time period from 2012 to about 2022, that 10-year period when we'd be implementing it. And then we'd also be looking at the equivalent of over 700 full and part-time jobs that would be associated. That's just in Klamath County.
That's average annual.
That's average annual.
Trey, do you got anything to weigh in? I mean, I'm sorry here. This is right down your alley, and it'd be nice to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm gonna do a ... with something. I was here in 2001 when the water was totally shut off. We were working with two companies at that time. Everybody remembers the good news when we were successful in bringing Home Depot into the community. The Home Depot people had worked very hard with us. They knew that the water wasn't shut off for the entire, the civilian population and everybody else. But we were also working with another good company, and they didn't pay too much attention to who was getting shut off and who wasn't. They just saw it as, oh, your water's being shut off, Klamath County. So we didn't get that company. And you can look at it with the glass half full or half empty, but the truth of the matter is we lost 50% of the industry we were looking at that year, because the water was, quote, shut off. My thought is, in addition to all of these things that might happen if we are successful, if we are not successful, and we go back to the bad old days of every year there being litigation and every year there being uncertainty of water, it affects not just agriculture, but all kinds of other similar and equal to and different than economic development projects. And you can bet your bottom dollar that will happen again.
That's a great point.
So I think there's real life examples just from this year with a partial shut off to the farmers. You know, we talked to, well, we handed out something like 3,500 balloons to small children this summer. So that kind of gives you an idea of how many people were coming by to visit with us. Talked to the guy that has porta potties in Klamath Falls. Business down 40% because not delivering porta potties to the fields this year. Those of us who like to take our have a corn maze. I mean, there's just so many spin-off. You know, the guy that has a driveline business saying, you know, boy, not installing as many drive lines this year because, you know.
So Greg, if the KBRA was actually implemented, I mean, we all know it's signed, it needs some authorization to actually get it implemented right now. If it had been in place this year, what would it have been like in the Klamath Irrigation Project?
Well, to give you an idea, a year like this, it's always hard. We have to say what would our demand be, and it always depends on a lot of factors, mainly the hydrology. But we looked this year and said we're definitely over 400,000 acre feet would be the demand for the folks I represent, essentially those that get water from the Klamath system. What we ended up with, what was announced early on was a third supply. I mean, essentially 150,000 acre feet. So then we have to figure out, okay, who gets water and who doesn't get water, which I can't begin to tell you the pain involved in that and the hard feelings and the fights that go on. So we had limited resources, taxpayer resources, that we tried to spread out to reduce that demand. We ended up getting in July an extra 35,000 acre feet that essentially probably kept some pastures alive and some alfalfa fields alive. And so your question, Dan, what would it have looked like under the KBRA? It's not a total simple answer, but if the KBRA was fully funded, if it was fully implemented, and the reason I'm confident in saying this is because some of the downstream tribes have written a paper on this topic and said this is how, under the KBRA, the system would have been managed differently over the fall and winter, which is where we got hurt. And so the answer is we would have had 330,000 acre feet this year as opposed to 150 to 185. We would have been looking at making up 70, 80,000 acre feet, which is manageable. It's not preferred, but it's manageable, and it doesn't require us to hit the groundwater, the aquifer, as hard as we hit it this year, and it caused problems, and we want to avoid those things. So it would have been a huge difference, and it would have been an orderly way to do it. We would have had a plan on, okay, here's how it's going to happen. People would have agreed ahead of time to not take water in a certain year, a certain circumstance. Joe, I just wanted to answer your question. I mean, the answer is that yes, taxpayers do deserve some protection here, and I think Steve and others have kind of talked about, treating symptoms. But through our representatives in Congress, there's prioritizations. I mean, the priority of Congress and the people of the United States has been an Endangered Species Act, a Clean Water Act, a variety of other things that come with a cost. I think Toby was right on. Just to go out and say, well, we need to get rid of those things. That's not realistic. I mean, I don't care who's in control of the White House or Congress. We've seen conservatives in control of both bodies, and no progress made on those fronts. So Congress makes priorities, but the fact of the matter is, we are spending a ton of money, Dan. I mean, there's a number of $700 million floating around about, that's just, and that's not the just kind of the restoration work that goes on. So people say and can be critical of the cost of, we shouldn't spend that much money on restoration. Well, guess what? We already are. I mean, add it up over time. And what we're doing right now, I like to say, it's just random acts of restoration. We put some money here, we put some money there. At least now we have a coordinated, agreed upon approach to solve a problem.
And that just follow up real quick. That $1 billion price tag is that $1 billion of new additional spending, or does that include like maybe consolidation of existing agency spending that's already happening? I'm not real clear on that myself.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The answer is it's not all new money. It's over a 10-year period of time. Some of that existing spending going on in the basin with agencies is going to reduce the amount of new money. There is debate happening right now about what that is. At one point, we thought it was half of that $1 billion over 10 years was going to be new money. It may be less than that now because of, Congress puts some pretty strong sideboards on funding too, so you can't always move it around. But to the extent there's flexibility in money that's spent here now, in the resource agencies I'm talking about, it's going to be targeted and wrapped into this program.